The Secret Doctrine by Elena Petrovna Blavatsky, a facsimile of the original edition of 1888, printed by the Cunningham Press, Alhambra, California. Book 2, Part 2, The Archaic Symbolism of the World Religions. Section 25, The Mysteries of the Hebdomad. We must not close this part on the symbolism of archaic history without an attempt to explain the perpetual recurrence of this truly mystic number in every scripture known to the Orientalists. As every religion, from the oldest to the latest, claims its presence and explains it on its own grounds agreeably with its own special dogmas, this is no easy task. We can, therefore, do no better or more explanatory work than to give a bird's-eye view of all. The sacred numbers 3, 4, 7 are the sacred numbers of light, life, and union, especially in this present Manvantara, our life cycle, of which number 7 is the special representative, or the factor number. This has now to be demonstrated. If one happened to ask a Brahmin learned in the Upanishads, so full of the secret wisdom of old, why he of whom 7 forefathers have drunk the juice of the moon plant is Trisuparna, as Bopa Veda is credited with saying, and why the Somapa Pitris should be worshipped by the Brahmin Trisuparna, very few could answer the question. Or if they knew, they would still less satisfy one's curiosity. Let us then hold to what the old esoteric doctrine teaches. Quote, when the first 7 appeared on earth, they threw the seed of everything that grows on the land into the soil. First came 3, and 4 were added to these as soon as a stone was transformed into plant. Then came the second 7, who, guiding the jivas of the planets, produced the middle, intermediate natures between plant and moving living animal. The third 7 evolved their chayas. The fifth 7 imprisoned their essence. Thus man became a saptaparna. Unquote from the commentary. Subsection A. Saptaparna. Such is the name given in occult phraseology to man. It means, as shown elsewhere, a 7-leaved plant, and the name has a great significance in the Buddhist legends. So it had also under disguise in the Greek, quote, myths, unquote. The T, or Tau, formed from the figure 7, and the Greek letter gamma was, in C section cross and circle, the symbol of life, and of life eternal, of earthly life, because gamma is the symbol of the earth, Gaia, and of life eternal, because the figure 7 is the symbol of the same life linked with divine life, the double glyph expressed in geometrical figures being a triangle and a quaternary, the symbol of a septenary man. On Gaia, hence the initiates in Greece called the Tau Gainius, son of Gaia, sprung from earth, like Tityos in Odyssey 7:324. End of note. Now the number 6 has been regarded in the ancient mysteries as an emblem of physical nature, for 6 is the representation of the 6 dimensions of all bodies, the 6 lines which compose their form, namely, the 4 lines extending to the 4 cardinal points, north, south, east, and west, and the 2 lines of height and thickness that answer to the zenith and the nadir. Therefore, while the cenary was applied by the sages to physical man, the septenary was for them the symbol of that man plus his immortal soul. Aragon gives in his Maçonnerie Occulte a very good illustration of the hieroglyphical cenary, as he calls our double equilateral triangle. He shows it as the symbol of the commingling of the philosophical 3 fires and the 3 waters, whence results the procreation of the elements of all things. The same idea is found in the Indian equilateral double triangle, for though it is called in that country the sign of Vishnu, yet in truth it is the symbol of the triad, or the Trimurti. For even in the exoteric rendering, the lower triangle, with the apex downward, is the symbol of Vishnu, the god of the moist principle and water, Narayana, or the moving principle in Nara, water, while the triangle with its apex upward is Siva, the principle of fire, symbolized by the triple flame in his hand. See the bronze statue of Tripurantika Siva, Mahadeva destroying Tripurasura at the Museum of the India House. Note on Narayana, or the moving principle in Nara, water. See the Mahabharata, for example in 3, in verses 189 and 3, where Vishnu says, I call the name of water Nara in ancient times, and am hence called Narayana, for that was always the abode I moved in, Ayana. It is into the water, or chaos, the moist principle of the Greeks and Hermes, that the first seed of the universe is thrown. The Spirit of God moves on the dark waters of space. Hence Thales makes of it the primordial element and prior to fire, which was yet latent in that spirit. End of note. It is these two interlaced triangles, wrongly called Solomon's seal, which also form the emblem of our society, that produce the septenary and the triad at one and the same time, and are the decade, whatever way this sign is examined, as all the 10 numbers are contained therein. For with a point in the middle or center, it is a 7-fold sign. Its triangles denote number 3, the 2 triangles show the presence of the binary, the triangles with a central point common to both yield the quaternary, the 6 points are the cenary, and the central point the unit, the quinary being traced by combination as a compound of 2 triangles, the even number, and of 3 sides in each triangle, the first odd number. This is the reason why Pythagoras and the ancients made the number 6 sacred to Venus, since the union of the 2 sexes and the spagiorization of matter by triad are necessary to develop the generative force, that prolific virtue and tendency to reproduction which is inherent in all bodies. Note. See the potency of the Pythagorean triangle by Aragon. End of note. Belief in creators, or the personified powers of nature, is in truth no polytheism, but a philosophical necessity. Like all the other planets of our system, the Earth has 7 logoi, the emanating rays of the one father ray, the protogonos, or the manifested logos, he who sacrifices his esse, or flesh, the universe, that the world may live and every creature therein have conscious being. Numbers 3 and 4 are respectively male and female, spirit and matter, and their union is the emblem of life eternal in spirit on its ascending arc, and in matter as the ever-resurrecting element by procreation and reproduction. The male line is vertical, the differentiated matter line is horizontal, the 2 forming the cross. The former, the 3, is invisible. The latter, the 4, is on the plane of objective perception. This is why all the matter of the universe, when analyzed by science to its ultimates, can be reduced to 4 elements only: carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and hydrogen, and why the 3 primaries, the noumenoi of the 4, or graduated spirit or force, have remained a terra incognita and mere speculations, names, to exact science. Her servants must believe in and study first the primary causes before they can hope to fathom the nature and acquaint themselves with the potentialities of the effects. First, while the men of Western learning had, and still have, the 4, or matter, to toy with, the Eastern occultists and their disciples, the great alchemists the world over, have the whole septenary to study from. Note. There are learned Brahmins who have protested against our septenary division. They are right from their own standpoint, as we are right from ours. Leaving the 3 aspects, or adjunct principles, out of calculation, they accept only 4 bodies, bases, including the ego, the reflected image of the Logos in the Karana Sarira, and even, strictly speaking, only 3 bodies. For purely theoretical metaphysical philosophy or purposes of meditation, these three may be sufficient, as shown by the Taraka Yoga system. But for practical occult teaching, our septenary division is the best and easiest. It is, however, a matter of school and choice. End of note. As those alchemists have it, when the 3 and the 4 kiss each other, the quaternary joins its middle nature with that of the triangle, or triad, that is, the face of one of its plane surfaces becoming the middle face of the other, and becomes a cube. Then only does it, the cube unfolded, become the vehicle and the number of life, the Father, Mother, 7. As a quote. This following diagram will perhaps assist the student to grasp these parallelisms. The human principles. 7th principle is Atma. 6th, Buddhi. 5th, Manas. All these are contained within the upper triangle. The 4th principle, Kamarupa, the principle of animal desire, which burns fiercely during life in matter, resulting in satiety. It is inseparable from animal existence. It is denoted with hydrogen, and in principles of physical nature, this is the lightest of all gases. It burns in oxygen, giving off the most intense heat of any substance in combustion, and forming water, the most stable of compounds. Hydrogen enters largely into all organic compounds. The 3rd human principle, Linga Sharira, connected with nitrogen, the inert vehicle or form on which the body is molded, the vehicle of life. It is dissipated very shortly after the disintegration of the body. In physical nature, it's an inert gas, the vehicle with which oxygen is mixed to adapt the latter for animal respiration. It also enters largely into all organic substances. The 2nd human principle is prana, life, the active power producing all vital phenomena. This is connected with oxygen. In physical nature, it's the support of combustion, the life-giving gas, the active chemical agent in all organic life. The 1st human principle is the gross matter of the body, the substance formed and molded over the linga sharira, chaya, by the action of prana. This is connected with carbon. In physical nature, it is the fuel par excellence, the basis of all organic substances, the chemical element of which forms the largest variety of compounds. Now we are taught that all these earliest forms of organic life also appear in septenary groups of numbers. From minerals, the soft stones that hardened, stanza, followed by the hard plants of the softened, which are the product of the mineral, for it is from the bosom of the stone that vegetation is born. From Commentary, Book 9:19. And then to man, all the primitive models in every kingdom of nature begin by being ethereal, transparent films. This, of course, takes place only in the first beginning of life. With the next period, they consolidate, and at the 7th begin to branch off into species, all except men, the first of the mammalian animals in the 4th round. Note: Protista are not animals. The reader is asked to bear in mind that when we speak of animals, the mammalians alone are meant. Crustacea, fishes, and reptiles are contemporary with, and most have preceded physical man in this round. All were bisexual, however, before the age of mammalia in the closing portion of the 2nd or Mesozoic ages, yet nearer to the Paleozoic than the Cainozoic ages. Smaller marsupial mammalia are contemporary with the huge reptilian monsters of the secondary. End of note. Virgil, versed as every ancient poet was, more or less, in esoteric philosophy, sang evolution in the following strains. Principiu caelum ac terras, camposque liquentes, lucemque globum lunae, titaniaque astra. Spiritus intus alit, totamque infusa per artus, mens agitat molem et magnus e corpore miscet, inde hominum pecudumque genus, etc. From Aeneid 6. Note: Quote, "First divine spirit within sustains the heaven, the earth and watery plains, the moon's orb and shining stars, and the eternal mind diffused through all the parts of nature actuates the whole stupendous frame and mingles with the vast body of the universe. Thence proceed the race of men and beasts, the vital principles of the flying kind, and the monsters which the ocean breeds under its smooth crystal plain. All proceeds from ether and from its 7 natures," said the alchemists. Science knows these only in their superficial effects. End of note. First came 3, or the triangle. This expression has a profound meaning in occultism, and the fact is corroborated in mineralogy, botany, and even in geology, as was demonstrated in the section on ancient chronology by the compound number 7, the 3 and the 4 being in it. Salt in solution proves it, for when its molecules, clustering together, begin to deposit themselves as a solid, the first shape they assume is that of triangles, or small pyramids and cones. It is the figure of fire, whence the word pyramids, while the second geometrical figure in manifested nature is a square or a cube. 4 and 6, for the particles of earth being cubical, those of fire are pyramidal, truly. From Enfield. The pyramidal shape is that assumed by the pines, the most primitive tree after the fern period. Thus the 2 opposites in cosmic nature, fire and water, heat and cold, begin their metrographical manifestations, one by a trimetric, the other by a hexagonal system. For the stellate crystals of snow viewed under a microscope are all and each of them a double or treble 6-pointed star with a central nucleus, like a miniature star within the larger one. Says Mr. Darwin in his Descent of Man on page 164, showing that the inhabitants of the seashore are greatly affected by the tides. Quote, "The most ancient progenitors in the kingdom of the vertebrata apparently consisted of a group of marine animals living either about the mean high water mark or about the mean low water mark, pass through a complete cycle of tidal changes in a fortnight. Now it is a mysterious fact that in the higher and now terrestrial vertebrata, many normal and abnormal processes have 1 or more weeks, septenates, as their periods, such as gestation of mammals, the duration of fevers, etc. The eggs of the pigeon are hatched in 2 weeks, or 14 days, those of the fowl in 3, those of the duck in 4, those of the goose in 5, and those of the ostrich in 7, quote from Bartlett's Land and Water. This number is closely connected with the moon, whose occult influence is ever manifesting itself in septenary periods. It is the moon which is the guide of the occult side of terrestrial nature, while the sun is the regulator and factor of manifested life. See also Volume 1, Part 2. And this truth was ever evident to the seers and the adepts. Jacob Böhme, by insisting on the fundamental doctrine of the 7 properties of everlasting Mother Nature, proved himself thereby a great occultist. But to return to the consideration of the septenary in ancient religious symbolism, to the metrological key or to the symbolism of the Hebrews, which reveals numerically the geometrical relations of the circle, all deity, to the square, cube, triangle, and all the integral emanations of the divine area, may be added the theogonic key. This key explains that Noah, the deluge patriarch, is in one aspect the permutation of the deity, the universal creative law, for the purpose of the formation of our earth, its population, and the propagation of life on it in general. Now, bearing in mind the septenary division in divine hierarchies, as in cosmic and human constitutions, the student will readily understand that Jah Noah is at the head of and is the synthesis of the lower cosmic quaternary. The upper sephirothal, the triangle, triad, of which Jehovah Bina, intelligence, is the left, female, angle, emanates the square, quaternary. The latter symbolizing by itself the heavenly man, the sexless Adam Kadmon, viewed as nature in the abstract, becomes a septenate again by emanating from itself the additional three principles, the lower terrestrial or manifested physical nature, matter, and our earth, the seventh being Malkut, the bride of the heavenly man, thus forming, with the high triad or Kether, the crown, the full number of the sephirothal tree, the 10, the total in unity or the universe. Apart from the high triad, the lower creative Sephiroth are 7. The above is not directly to our point, though it is a necessary reminder to facilitate the comprehension of what follows. The question at issue is to show that Jah-Noah, or the Jehovah of the Hebrew Bible, the alleged creator of our earth, of man and all upon it, is A, the lowest septenary, the creative Elohim in his cosmic aspect, B, the Tetragrammaton, or the Adam Kadmon, the heavenly man of the 4 letters in his theogonic and Kabbalistic aspects, C, Noah, identical with the Hindu Sishta, the human seed, left for the peopling of the earth from a previous creation or Manvantara, as expressed in the Puranas, or the pre-Diluvian period, as rendered allegorically in the Bible, in his cosmic character. But whether a quaternary tetragrammaton or a triad, the Bible creative God is not the universal 10 unless blended with Ein Sof, as Brahma with Parabrahm, but a septenary, one of the many septenaries of the universal septenate. In the explanation of the question now in hand, his position and status as Noah may best be shown by placing the 3, triangle, and 4, square, on parallel lines with the cosmic and human principles. For the latter, the old familiar classification is made use of. Thus, the human aspects of principles versus the cosmic aspects or principles. The human aspects of principles: 1. Universal spirit, Atma; 2. Spiritual soul, Buddhi; 3. Human soul, mind, Manas; 4. Animal soul, Kamarupa; 5. Astral body, Linga Sharira; 6. Life essence, Prana; 7. Body, Stula Sharira. The cosmic aspects of principles: 1. The unmanifested logos; 2. Universal latent ideation; 3. Universal or cosmic active intelligence; 4. Cosmic chaotic energy; 5. Astral ideation reflecting terrestrial things; 6. Life essence or energy; 7. The earth. As an additional demonstration of the statement, let the reader turn to scientific works: Ararat, the Mount of Descent; Hor Jared. Hatto mentions it out of composition by Aret. Editor of Moses Chiarensis says, "By this, they say, is signified the first place of descent of the ark." Ryan's Annals, Volume 4, pages 5, 6, and 15. Cosmic aspects, notes. 2. Universal latent ideation. The Advaita Vedantic philosophy classifies this as the highest trinity, or rather the trinitarian aspect of Chinmatra, Parabrahman, explained by them as the bare potentiality of prajna, the power or the capacity that gives rise to perception, Chidakasam, the infinite field or plane of universal consciousness, and Asat, Mula Prakriti, or undifferentiated matter. See Personal and Impersonal God in 5 Years of Theosophy. 3. Universal cosmic active intelligence. Note: differentiated matter existing in the solar system, does not touch the whole cosmos, in 7 different conditions, and prajna, or the capacity of perception, existing likewise in 7 different aspects corresponding to the 7 conditions of matter, there must necessarily be 7 states of consciousness in man, and according to the greater or smaller development of these states, the system of religions and philosophies were schemed out. End of note. Under Berg, mountain, Noxus of Ararat. Ararat for Arath, earth, Aramaic reduplication. Here it is seen that Nok and Hatu make use of the same equivalent in Arath, with the meaning of earth. Note. In Source of Measures, page 65, the author explains, note that in Hebrew, Jared, the father of Enoch, is construed to be the amount of descent, and it is said to be the same with Ararat, on which the cubical structure of Noah, or foundation measure, rested, Jared. The root derivations are the same with those of Ararat, of acre, of earth. As by Hebrew metrology, Jared is literally in British YRD. Hence in Jared is to be found literally our English word yard, and also Yah or Jehovah is rod. It is noteworthy that the son of Jared, meaning Enoch, lived 365 years, and it is said of him by rabbinical commentators that the year period of 365 days was discovered by him, thus bringing again time and distance values together, that is, year time descended by coordination, through the Yod or Yared, who thus was its father in or through Enoch, and truly enough, 1296 equals yard or yared by 4 equals 5184. The characteristic value of the solar day in thirds, which, as stated, may be styled the parent numerically of the solar year, from the same source, page 65. This, however, by the astronomical and numerical Kabbalistic methods. Esoterically, Jared is the 3rd race and Enoch the 4th. But as he is taken away alive, he symbolizes also the elect saved in the 4th, while Noah is the 5th from the beginning, the family saved from waters, eternally and physically. End of note. On spirit of the earth, Jehovah, note. Represented as the jealous, angry, turbulent, and ever-active God, revengeful, and kind only to his chosen people when propitiated by them. End of note. Mount Ararat, note. Noah and his 3 sons are the collective symbol of this quaternary in many and various applications, Ham being the chaotic principle. End of note. Noah thus symbolizing both the root Manu and the seed Manu, or the power which developed the planetary chain and our Earth, and the seed race, the 5th, which was saved, or the last sub-races of the 4th perished, Vaivashvata Manu. The number 7 will be seen to recur at every step. It is he, Noah, who represents, as Jehovah's permutation, the septenary host of the Elohim, and is thus the father or creator, the preserver of all animal life. Hence verses 2 and 3 of chapter 7 of Genesis, of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by 7s, the male 3 and the female 4, of fowls also of the air by 7s, etc., etc., followed by all the 7ing of days and the rest. Subsection B. The Tetraktys in relation to the heptagon. Thus number 7, as a compound of 3 and 4, is the factor element in every ancient religion, because it is the factor element in nature. Its adoption must be justified, and it must be shown to be the number par excellence. For since the appearance of the book Esoteric Buddhism, frequent objections have been made and doubts expressed as to the correctness of these assertions. And here let the student be told at once that in all such numerical divisions the one universal principle, although referred to as the one, because the only one, never enters into the calculations. It stands in its character of the absolute, the infinite, and the universal abstraction entirely by itself and independent of every other power, whether noumenal or phenomenal. It is neither matter nor spirit. It is neither ego nor non-ego, and it is neither object nor subject, says the author of Personal and Impersonal God, and adds, quote, in the language of Hindu philosophers, it is the original and eternal combination of Purusha, spirit, and Prakriti, matter. As the Advaitis hold that an external object is merely the product of our mental states, Prakriti is nothing more than an illusion, and Purusha is the only reality. It is the one existence which remains in the universe of ideas. This, then, is the Parabrahm of the Advaitis. Even if there were to be a personal God, with anything like a material upadhi, physical basis of whatever form, from the standpoint of an Advaiti, there will be as much reason to doubt his noumenal existence as there would be in the case of any other object. In their opinion, a conscious God cannot be the origin of the universe, as his ego would be the effect of a previous cause, if the word conscious conveys but its ordinary meaning. They cannot admit that the grand total of all the states of consciousness in the universe is their deity, as these states are constantly changing, and as a cosmic ideation ceases during pralaya. There is only one permanent condition in the universe, which is the state of perfect unconsciousness, bare chirakasam, the field of consciousness, in fact. When my readers once realize the fact that this grand universe is in reality but a huge aggregation of various states of consciousness, they will not be surprised to find that the ultimate state of unconsciousness is considered as Parabrahman by the Advaitis. Note, see 5 Years of Theosophy article Personal and Impersonal God. End of note. Being itself entirely out of human reckoning or calculation, yet this huge aggregation of various states of consciousness is a septenate, in its totality entirely composed of septenary groups, simply because the capacity of perception exists in 7 different aspects corresponding to the 7 conditions of matter from the same source, or the 7 properties, or states, or conditions of matter. And therefore, number 1 down to number 7 begins in the esoteric calculations with the first manifested principle, which is number 1 if we commence from the above, and the 7th when reckoning from below, or from the lowest principle. The tetrad is esteemed in the Kabbalah, as it was by Pythagoras, the most perfect or rather sacred number, because it emanated from the 1, the first manifested unit, or rather the 3 in 1. Yet the latter has been ever impersonal, sexless, incomprehensible, though within the possibility of the higher mental perceptions. The first manifestation of the eternal monad was never meant to stand as the symbol of another symbol, the unborn for the element-born, or the one logos for the heavenly man. Tetragrammaton, or the Tetraktys of the Greeks, is the second logos, the demiurgos. The tetrad, as Thomas Taylor thought, vide the Pythagorean triangle, is the animal self of Plato, who, as Syrianus justly observes, was the best of the Pythagoreans. It subsists at the extremity of the intelligible triad, as is most satisfactorily shown by Proclus in the 3rd book of his treatise on the Theogony of Plato. And between these 2 triads, the double triangle, the one intelligible and the other intellectual, another order of gods exists which partakes of both extremes. The Pythagorean world, Plutarch tells us, consisted of a double quaternary. This statement corroborates what is said about the choice by the exoteric theologies of the lower Tetraktys, for the quaternary of the intellectual world, the world of Mahat, is Tagaton, Nous, Psyche, Hele, Highly, while that of the sensible world of matter, which is properly what Pythagoras meant by the word cosmos, is fire, air, water, and earth. The four elements are called by the name of rhizomata or rhizomata, the roots or principles of all mixed bodies. That is, the lower Tetraktys is the root of illusion of the world of matter, and this is the tetragrammaton of the Jews, and the mysterious deity over which the modern Kabbalists make such a fuss. Verse number 4 forms the arithmetical mean between the monad and the heptad, as this contains all powers, both of the productive and produced numbers. For this of all numbers under 10 is made of a certain number. The duad doubled makes a tetrad, and the tetradoubled or unfolded makes the hebdomad, the septenary. 2 multiplied into itself produces 4, and retorted into itself makes the first cube. This first cube is a fertile number, the ground of multitude and variety, constituted of 2 and 4, depending on the monad, the seventh. Thus, the 2 principles of temporal things, the pyramids and cube, form and matter, flow from one fountain, the tetragon on earth, the monad in heaven." Unquote. See Reuchlin, Kabbalah 1, Chapter 2. Here Reuchlin, the great authority on the Kabbalah, shows the cube to be matter, whereas the pyramid or the triad is form. With the Hermetians, the number 4 becomes the symbol of truth only when amplified into a cube, which unfolded makes 7, as symbolizing the male and female elements and the elements of life. Note: in the Hebrew-Egyptian mystery, The Source of Measures, the author shows on page 50 that the figure of the cube unfolded in connection with the circle becomes a cross proper, or the tau form, and the attachment of the circle to this last gives the ansated cross of the Egyptians. While there are but 6 faces to a cube, the representation of the cross as the cube unfolded, as to the crossbars, displays one face of the cube as common to 2 bars, counted as belonging to either. That is, once counted horizontally and once vertically. 4 for the upright and 3 for the crossbar, making 7 in all. Adding, here we have the famous 4 and 3 and 7. Esoteric philosophy explains that 4 is the symbol of the universe in its potential state, or chaotic matter, and that it requires spirit to permeate it actively. That is, the primordial abstract triangle has to quit its one-dimensional quality and spread across that matter, thus forming a manifested basis on the 3-dimensional space, in order that the universe should manifest intelligibly. This is achieved by the cube unfolded, hence the ansated cross as the symbol of man, generation, and life. In Egypt, Ankh signified soul, life, and blood. It is the ensouled living man, the septenary. End of note. Some students have been puzzled to account for the vertical line, which is male becoming in the cross a 4-partitioned line, 4 being a female number, while the horizontal, the line of matter, becomes 3-divisioned. But this is easy of explanation. Since the middle face of the cube unfolded is common to both the vertical and the horizontal bar, or double line, it becomes neutral ground, so to say, and belongs to neither. The spirit line remains triadic, and the matter line twofold, 2 being an even and therefore a female number also. Moreover, according to Theon, the Pythagoreans who gave the name of harmony to the Tetraktys, because it is a diatessaron in sesquitertia, were of opinion that the division of the canon of monochord was made by the Tetraktys in the duad, triad, and tetrad, for it comprehends a sesquitertia, a sesquialtra, a double, a triple, and a quadruple portion, the section of which is 27. In the ancient musical notation, the tetrachord consisted of 3 degrees or intervals, and 4 terms of sounds called by the Greeks diatesaron, and by us a 4th. Moreover, the quaternary, though an even, therefore a female, infernal number, varied according to its form. This is shown by Stanley in Pythagoras, page 61. The 4 was called by the Pythagoreans the key-keeper of nature, but in union with the 3, which made it 7, it became the most perfect and harmonious number, nature herself. The 4 was the masculine of feminine form when forming the cross, and 7 is the master of the moon, for this planet is forced to alter her appearance every 7 days. It is on number 7 that Pythagoras composed his doctrine on the harmony and music of the spheres, calling a tone the distance of the moon from the earth, from the moon to Mercury half a tone, from thence to Venus the same, from Venus to the Sun 1½ tones, from the Sun to Mars a tone, from thence to Jupiter half a tone, from Jupiter to Saturn half a tone, and thence to the zodiac a tone, thus making 7 tones, the diapason harmony. All the melody of nature is in those 7 tones, and therefore is called the voice of nature. Plutarch explains that the Achaean Greeks regarded the tetrad as the root and principle of all things, since it was the number of the elements which gave birth to all visible and invisible created things. With the brothers of the rosy cross, the figure of the cross, or cube unfolded, formed the subject of a disquisition in one of the theosophic degrees of Pyrrhe, and was treated according to the fundamental principles of light and darkness, or good and evil. Writes Reuchlin, quote, "The intelligible world proceeds out of the divine mind, or unit, after this manner. The Tetraktys, reflecting upon its own essence, the first unit, productrix of all things, and on its own beginning, saith thus, once 1, twice 2, immediately ariseth a tetrad, having on its top the highest unit, and becomes a pyramis, whose base is a plain tetrad answerable to her superficies, upon which the radiant light of the divine unity produceth the form of incorporeal fire, by reason of the descent of Juno, matter, to inferior things. Hence ariseth essential light, not burning but illuminating. This is the creation of the middle world, which the Hebrews call the supreme, the world of their deity. It is termed Olympus, entirely light, and replete with separate forms, where it is the seat of the immortal gods, Deum Domus Alta, whose top is unity, its wall trinity, and its superficies quaternity. Unquote from Reuchlin, Kabbalah, page 689. The superficies has thus to remain a meaningless surface if left by itself, unity only illuminating a quaternity. The famous lower 4 has to build for itself also a wall from trinity, if it would be manifested. Moreover, the tetragrammaton, or microprosopus, is Jehovah, arrogating to himself very improperly the was, is, will be, now translated into the I am that I am, and interpreted as referring to the highest abstract deity, while esoterically and in plain truth it means only periodically chaotic, turbulent, and eternal matter with all its potentialities. For the tetragrammaton is one with nature or Isis, and is the exoteric series of androgyne gods such as Osiris Isis, Jove Juno, Brahmavak, or the Kabbalistic Jehovah, all male-females. Every anthropomorphic god in old nations, as Marcellinus Vicinus well observed, has his name written with 4 letters. Thus with the Egyptians he was Teut, the Arabs, Allah, the Persians, Sire, the Magi, Orosi, the Mahometans, Abdi, the Greeks, Theos, the ancient Turks, Esar, the Latins, Deus, to which J. Lorenzo Anina adds the German Gott, the Sarmatian Buu, etc., etc. The monad being one, an odd number, the ancients therefore called the odd the only perfect numbers, and selfishly perhaps, yet as a fact, considered them all masculine and perfect, applicable to the celestial gods, while even numbers such as 2, 4, 6, and especially 8 as being female were regarded as imperfect, and given only to the terrestrial and infernal deities. In his 8th Ecloge, Virgil records the fact by saying, Numero Deus impare gaudet, unequal numbers please the gods. But number 7, the heptagon, the Pythagoreans considered to be a religious and perfect number. It was called telesphoros, because by it all the universe and mankind is led to its end, that is, its culmination. Being under the rule of 7 sacred planets, the doctrine of the spheres shows, from Lemuria to Pythagoras, the 7 powers of terrestrial and sublunary nature, as well as the 7 great forces of the universe, proceeding and evolving in 7 tones, which are the 7 notes of the musical scale. Note on being under the rule of 7 sacred planets. The 7 planets are not limited to this number because the ancients knew of no others, but simply because they were the primitive or primordial houses of the 7 logoi. There may be 9 or 99 other planets discovered. This does not alter the fact of these 7 alone being sacred. End of note. The heptad, our septenary, was regarded as the number of a virgin, because it is as unborn, like the Logos or the Aja of the Vedantins, without a father or a mother, but proceeding directly from the monad, which is the origin and crown of all things. Pythagorean Triangle, page 174. And if the heptad is made to proceed from the monad directly, then it is, as taught in the secret doctrine of the oldest schools, the perfect and sacred number of this Mahamanvantara of ours. The septenary, or heptad, was sacred indeed to several gods and goddesses: to Mars with his 7 attendants, to Osiris, whose body was divided into 7 and twice 7 parts, to Apollo the sun, between his 7 planets, and playing the hymn to the 7-rayed on his 7-stringed harp, to Minerva, the fatherless and the motherless, and others. Cis-Himalayan occultism with its 7ing, and because of such 7ing must be regarded as the most ancient, the original of all. It is opposed by some fragments left by the Neoplatonists, and the admirers of the latter, who hardly understand what they defend, say to us, See, your forerunners believed only in a triple man composed of a spirit, soul, and body. Behold, the Taraka Raya Yoga of India limits that division to 3, we to 4, and the Vedantins to 5 koshas, they say. To this, we of the archaic school asks, why then does the Greek poet say that it is not 4 but 7 who sing the praise of the spiritual sun? He says, 7 sounding letters sing the praise of me, the immortal God, the almighty deity. Why again is the triune Yao, the mystery of God, called the fourfold, and yet the triad and tetratic symbols come under one unified name with the Christians, the Jehovah of the 7 letters? Why again in the Hebrew Sheba is the oath, the Pythagorean Tetraktys, identical with number 7, or as Mr. Gerald Massey has it, taken on oath was synonymous with 2-7, and the 10 expressed by the letter Yod, which was the full number of Yahweh-Sabaoth, the 10-lettered God. In Lucian's auction, Pythagoras asks, how do you reckon? The reply is 1, 2, 3, 4. Then do you see, says Pythagoras, in what you conceive 4 there are 10. then a perfect triangle, and our O-art, Tetraktys, 4 or 7. Why does Proclus say in Timaeus, the father of the golden verses celebrates the Tetraktys as the fountain of perennial nature? Simply because those Western Kabbalists who quote the exoteric proofs against us have no idea of the real esoteric meaning, because all the ancient cosmologies, the oldest cosmographies of the two most ancient people of the fifth root race, the Hindu-Aryans and the Egyptians, adding to them the early Chinese races, the remnants of the fourth or Atlantean race, based the whole of their mysteries on number 10, the high triangle standing for the invisible and metaphysical world, the lower 3 and 4, or the septennate, for the physical realm. It is not the Jewish Bible that brought number 7 into prominence. Hesiod used the words, "The seventh is the sacred day," before the Sabbath of, quote, Moses, unquote, was ever heard of. The use of number 7 was never confined to any one nation. This is well testified by the 7 vases in the Temple of the Sun, near the ruins of Babylon in Upper Egypt. The 7 fires burning continually for ages before the altars of Mithra, the 7 holy fanes of the Arabians, the 7 peninsulas, the 7 islands, 7 seas, mountains, and rivers of India, and of the Zohar. See Ibn Gibril. The Jewish Sephiroth of the 7 splendors, the 7 Gothic deities, the 7 worlds of the Chaldeans and their 7 spirits, the 7 constellations mentioned by Hesiod and Homer, and all the interminable sevens which the Orientalists find in every manuscript they discover. What we have to say finally is this. Enough has been brought forward to show why the human principles were and are divided in the esoteric schools into 7. Make it 4, and it will either leave man minus his lower terrestrial elements, or, if viewed from a physical standpoint, make of him a soulless animal. The quaternary must be the higher or the lower, the celestial or terrestrial Tetraktys, to become comprehensible according to the teachings of the esoteric ancient school. Man must be regarded as a septenary. This was so well understood that even the so-called Christian Gnostics had adopted this time-honored system. Read a section on the 7 souls. This remained for a long time secret, as though suspected, no manuscripts of that time spoke of it clearly enough to satisfy the skeptic. But there comes to our rescue the literary curiosity of our age, the oldest and best preserved gospel of the Gnostics, Pistis Sophia. To make the proof absolutely complete, we shall quote from an authority, C.W. King, the only archaeologist who had a faint glimmer of this elaborate doctrine, and the best writer of the day on the Gnostics and their gens. According to this extraordinary piece of religious literature, a true Gnostic fossil, a human entity, is a septenary ray from the One, just as our school teaches. Note: the 7 centers of energy evolved or rendered objective by the action of Fohat upon the one element, or in fact the 7th principle of the 7 elements which exist throughout manifested cosmos. We may here point out that they are in truth the Sephiroth of the Kabbalists, the 7 gifts of the Holy Ghost in the Christian system, and in a mystical sense, the 7 children or sons of Devaki killed before the birth of Krishna by Kamsa. Our 7 principles symbolize all of these. We have to part or separate from them before we reach the Krishna or Christ state, that of a Jivan Mukta, and center ourselves entirely in the highest, the 7th or the One. End of note. It is composed of 7 elements, 4 of which are borrowed from the 4 Kabbalistical manifested worlds. Thus, from Asia it gets the nephesh, or seat of the physical appetites, vital breath also. From Jizayra, the ruach, or seat of the passions, within brackets, question mark, exclamation mark. From Bria, the neshama, and from Aziluth it obtains the chaya, or principle of spiritual life, from King. This looks like an adaptation of the Platonic theory of the soul's obtaining its respective faculties from the planets in its downward progress through their spheres. But the Pistis Sophia, with its accustomed boldness, puts this theory into a much more poetical shape. The inner man is similarly made up of 4 constituents, but these are supplied by the rebellious aeons of the spheres, being the power, a particle of the divine light, divine particula ore, yet left in themselves. The soul, the 5th, formed out of the tears of their eyes and the sweat of their torments, the agrimimon preumpatos, counterfeit of the spirit, seemingly answering to our conscience, the 6th, and lastly the moira, fate, karmic ego, whose business it is to lead the man to the end appointed for him. If he hath to die by the fire, to lead him into the fire. If he hath to die by a wild beast, to lead him unto the wild beasts, etc. The 7th. Note on moira, fate. Moira is destiny, not fate in this case, as it is an appellation, not a proper noun. See Wolf's translation in Odyssey 22, 413. But Moira, the goddess of fate, is a deity who, like Ira, gives to all their portion of good and evil, and is therefore karma, vide little. By this abbreviation, however, the subject to destiny or karma is meant, the self or ego, and that which is reborn. Nor is anguditimon, nor is antimimon preumpatos our conscience, but our buddhi, nor is it again the counterfeit of spirit, but modelled after, or a counterpart of the spirit, which buddhi is as the vehicle of Atma. End of note. Subsection C. The septenary element in the Vedas. It corroborates the occult teaching concerning the 7 globes and the 7 races. We have to go to the very source of historical information if we would bring our best evidence to testify to the facts enunciated. For, though entirely allegorical, the Rig Vedic hymns are nonetheless suggestive. The 7 rays of Surya, the sun, are made therein parallel to the 7 worlds of every planetary chain, to the 7 rivers of heaven and earth, the former being the 7 creative hosts, and the latter the 7 men, or primitive human groups. The 7 ancient rishis, the progenitors of all that lives and breathes on earth, are the 7 friends of Agni, his 7 horses, or 7 heads. The human race has sprung from fire and water, it is allegorically stated, fashioned by the fathers or the ancestor sacrifices from Agni. For Agni, the Ashwins, the Adityas, are all synonymous with that sacrificer, or the fathers variously called Pitar, Pitris, fathers, Angirases, the Sadyas, divine sacrifices, the most occult of all. They are called Devaputra Rishaya, or the sons of God. Note, Professor Roth in Peter's lexicon defines the Agnirases as an intermediate race of higher beings between gods and men, while Professor Weber, according to his invariable custom of modernizing and anthropomorphizing the divine, sees in them the original priests of the religion which was common to the Aryan Hindus and Persians. Roth is right. Angirases was one of the names of the Dhyanis, or Devas instructors, Gurudeva, of the late 3rd, the 4th, and even of the 5th race initiates. End of note. The sacrifices, moreover, are collectively the one sacrificer, the father of the gods, Vishvakarman, who performed the great Sarvameda ceremony and ended by sacrificing himself. See Rig Vedic hymns. In these hymns the heavenly man is called Purusha, the man, from whom Viraj was born, and from Viraj the mortal man. It is Varuna, now drawn from his sublime position to be the chief of the Lord's Dhyanis or Devas, who regulates all natural phenomena, who makes a path for the sun for him to follow. The 7 rivers of the sky, the descending creative gods, and the 7 rivers of the earth, the 7 primitive mankinds, are under his control, as will be seen. For he who breaks Varuna's laws, Vratani, causes of natural action, active laws, is punished by Indra, the Vedic powerful god whose vrata, law or power, is greater than the vratani of any other god. Thus Rig Veda, the oldest of all the known ancient records, may be shown to corroborate the occult teachings in almost every respect. Its hymns, the records written by the earliest initiates of the fifth, our race, concerning the primordial teachings, speak of the 7 races, 2 still to come, allegorizing them by the 7 streams, and of the 5 races, Panka Christaya, which have already inhabited this world on the 5 regions, Panka Pradika, as also of the 3 continents that were. Note: 3 submerged or otherwise destroyed continents, the first continent of the first race prevailing to the last and existing to this day, are described in the occult doctrine: the Hyperborean, the Lemurian, adopting the name now known in science, and the Atlantean. Most of Asia issued from under the waters after the destruction of Atlantis. Africa came still later, while Europe is the 5th, and the latest portions of the 2 Americas being far older. But of these more anon. The initiates who recorded the Vedas, or the rishis of our 5th race, wrote at a time when Atlantis had already gone down. Atlantis is the 4th continent that appeared, but the 3rd that disappeared. End of note. It is those scholars only who will master the secret meaning of the Purusha Sukta, in which the intuition of the modern Orientalist has chosen to see one of the very latest hymns of the Rig Veda, who may hope to understand how harmonious are its teachings and how corroborative of the esoteric doctrines. One must study in all the abstruseness of their metaphysical meaning the relations in it between the heavenly man, Purusha, sacrificed for the production of the universe and all in it, see Vishvakarman, and the terrestrial mortal man, before one realizes the hidden philosophy of this verse. Quote 15. He, man, Purusha or Vishvakarman, had 7 enclosing logs of fuel and thrice 7 layers of fuel. When the gods performed the sacrifice, they bound the man as victim. Unquote. And this relates to the 3 septenary primeval races, and shows the antiquity of the Vedas, who knew of no other, probably in this earliest oral teachings, and also to the 7 primeval groups of mankind, as Vishvakarman represents divine humanity collectively. Note: nor is this archaic teaching so very unscientific, since one of the greatest naturalists of the age, the late Professor Agassiz, admitted the multiplicity of the geographical origins of man and supported it to the end of his life. The unity of the human species was accepted by the illustrious professor of Cambridge, USA, in the same way as the occultists do, namely in the sense of their essential and original homogeneity and their origin from one and the same source. For example, Negroes, Aryans, Mongols, etc., have all originated in the same way and from the same ancestors. The latter were all of one essence, yet differentiated because belonging to 7 planes which differed in degree, though not in kind. That original physical difference was but little more accentuated by that of geographical and climatic conditions later on. This is not the theory of Agassiz, of course, but the esoteric version. It is fully discussed in the addenda in Part 3. End of note. The same doctrine is found reflected in other old religions. It may and must have come down to us disfigured and misinterpreted, as in the case of the Parsis, who read it in their Vendidad and elsewhere without understanding the allusions they contain any better than the Orientalists do. Yet the doctrine is plainly mentioned in their old works. See the enumeration of the 7 spheres, not the Karshvara of the earth, as believed in Fargod 19:30. But see further on. Comparing the esoteric teaching with the interpretations by James Darmster, the Vendidad, edited by Professor Max Müller, one may see at a glance where the mistake is made, and the cause that produced it. The passage runs thus, quote, "The Indo-Iranian Ahura, was often conceived as sevenfold by the play of certain mythical, (formulae, and the strength of certain mythical, numbers. The ancestors of the Indo-Iranians had been led to speak of 7 worlds, and the supreme god was often made sevenfold, as well as the worlds over which he ruled." Note: the 7 worlds are, as said, the 7 spheres of the chain, each presided over by one of the 7 great gods of every religion. When the latter became degraded and anthropomorphized, and the metaphysical ideas nearly forgotten, the synthesis, or the highest, the 7th, was separated from the rest, and that personification became the 8th god, whom monotheism tried to unify, but failed. In no exoteric religion is God really one, if analyzed metaphysically. End of note. Quote, "The 7 worlds became in Persia the 7 Karshvara of the earth. The earth is divided into 7 Karshvara, only one of which is known and accessible to man, the one on which we live, namely Hvanirata, which amounts to saying that there are 7 earths." Note: the 6 invisible globes of our chain are both worlds and earths, as is our own, albeit invisible. But where could be the 6 invisible earths on this globe? End of note. Parsi mythology knows also of 7 heavens. Hvanirata itself is divided into 7 climes, and the same division and doctrine is to be found in the oldest and most revered of the Hindu scriptures, the Rig Veda. Mention is made therein of 6 worlds besides our earth, the 6 Rajamsi above Prithivi, the earth, or this, Hidam, as opposed to that which is yonder, that is, the 6 globes on the 3 other planes or worlds. See Rig Veda. The italics are ours to point out the identity of the tenets with those of the esoteric doctrine and the mistake made. The Magi or Mazdaeans only believed in what other people believed in, namely in 7 worlds or globes of our planetary chain, of which only one is accessible to man at the present time, our Earth, and in the successive appearance and destruction of 7 continents or earths on this our globe, each continent being divided in commemoration of the 7 globes, 1 visible, 6 invisible, into 7 islands or continents, 7 climes, etc., etc. This was a common belief in those days when the now secret doctrine was open to all. It is this multiplicity of localities under septenary division that made the Orientalists, led astray moreover by the oblivion of both the uninitiated Hindus and Parsis of their primitive doctrines, feel so puzzled by this ever-recurring 7-fold number as to regard it as mythical. It is that oblivion of the first principles which has led the Orientalists off the right track and made them commit the greatest blunders. The same failure is found in the definition of the gods. Those who are ignorant of the esoteric doctrine of the earliest Aryans can never assimilate or understand correctly the metaphysical meaning contained in these beings. Ahura Mazda, or Majd, was the head and synthesis of the 7 Ameshaspentas, or Amshaspens, and therefore an Ameshaspenta himself. Just as Jehovah Bina Arelim was the head and synthesis of the Elohim and no more, so Agni Vishnu Surya was the synthesis and head, or the focus whence emanated in physics and in metaphysics from the spiritual as from the physical sun, the 7 rays, the 7 fiery tongues, the 7 planets or gods. All these became supreme gods and the one God, but only after the loss of the primeval secrets, the sinking of Atlantis, or the quote flood unquote, and the occupation of India by the Brahmins, who sought safety on the summits of the Himalayas, when even the high tablelands of what is now Tibet became submerged for a time. Ahura Mazda is addressed only as the most blissful spirit, creator of the corporeal world in the Vendidad. Ahura Mazda in its literal translation means the wise lord. Ahura, lord, and Mazda, wise. Moreover, this name of Ahura, in Sanskrit Asura, connects him with the Manasa Putras, the sons of wisdom who informed the mindless man and endowed him with his mind, Manas. Ahura, Asura, may be derived from the root A, to be, but in its primal signification it is what the secret teaching shows it to be. When geology shall have found out how many thousands of years ago the disturbed waters of the Indian Ocean reached the highest plateau of Central Asia, when the Caspian Sea and the Persian Gulf made one with it, then only will they know the age of the Aryan Brahmanical nation, and the time of its descent into the plains of Hindustan, which it did millenniums later. Yima, the so-called first man in the Vendidad, as much as his twin brother Yama, the son of Vaivashvata Manu, belongs to two epochs of universal history. He is the progenitor of the second human race, hence the personification of the shadows of the Pitris, and the father of the post-diluvian humanity. The Magi said Yima as we say man when speaking of mankind. The fair Yima, the first mortal who converses with Ahura Mazda, is the first man who dies or disappears, not the first who is born. The son of Viksangat was like the son of Vaivashvata, the symbolical man who stood in esotericism as the representative of the first three races and the collective progenitor thereof. Of these races the first two never died, but only vanished, absorbed in their progeny, and the third knew death only towards its close, after the separation of the sexes and its fall into generation. Note: death came only after man had become a physical creature, Vidasupa. The men of the first race and also the second dissolved and disappeared in their progeny. End of note. This is plainly alluded to in the second far-god of the Vendidad. Yima refuses to become the bearer of the law of Ahura Mazda, saying, I was not born, I was not taught to be the preacher and the bearer of thy law. And then Ahura Mazda asks him to make his men increase and watch over his world. 3 and 4. He refuses to become the priest of Ahura Mazda, because he is his own priest and sacrificer. But he accepts the second proposal. He is made to answer, quote, Yes, I will rule and watch over thy world. There shall be, while I am king, neither cold wind nor hot wind, neither disease nor death. Unquote. Then Ahura Mazda brings him a golden ring and a poniard, the emblems of sovereignty, and under the sway of Yima, quote, 300 winters passed away, and the earth was replenished with flocks and herds, with men and dogs and birds, and with red blazing fires, etc. And 300 winters mean 300 periods or cycles. Replenished, mark well, that is to say, all this had been on it before, and thus is proven the knowledge of the doctrine about the successive destructions of the world and its life cycles. Once the 300 winters were over, Ahura Mazda warns Yima that the earth is becoming too full, and men have nowhere to live. Then Yima steps forward, and with the help of the Spenta Aromaita, the female genius or spirit of the earth, makes that earth stretch out and become larger by 1/3, after which new herds and flocks of men appear upon it. Ahura Mazda warns him again, and Yima makes the earth by the same magic power to become larger by 2/3. 900 winters pass away, and Yima has to perform the ceremony for the 3rd time. The whole of this is allegorical. The 3 processes of stretching the earth refer to the 3 successive continents and races issuing one after and from the other, as explained more fully elsewhere. After the 3rd time, Ahura Mazda warns Yima in an assembly of celestial gods and excellent mortals that upon the material world the fatal winters are going to fall, and all life will perish. This is the old Mazdaean symbolism for the, quote, flood, unquote, and the coming cataclysm to Atlantis, which sweeps away every race in its turn. Like Vaivashvata Manu and Noah, Yima makes a vara, an enclosure, an ark, under the god's direction, and brings thither the seed of every living creature, animals, and fires. It is of this, quote, earth, unquote, or new continent, that Zarathustra became the lawgiver and ruler. This was the 4th race in its beginning, after the men of the 3rd began to die out. Till then, as said, there had been no regular death, but only a transformation, for men had no personality as yet. They had monads, breaths of the one breath, and as impersonal as the source from which they proceeded. They had bodies, or rather shadows of bodies, which were sinless, hence karmaless. Therefore, as there was no kamaloka, least of all nirvana or even devakan, for the souls of men who had no personal egos, there could be no intermediate periods between the incarnations. Like the phoenix, primordial man resurrected out of his old into a new body. Each time, and with each new generation, he became more solid, more physically perfect, agreeably with the evolutionary law, which is the law of nature. Death came with a complete physical organism, and with it moral decay. This explanation shows one more old religion agreeing in its symbology with the universal doctrine. Elsewhere, the oldest Persian traditions, the relics of Mazdaism of the still older Magians, are given, and some of them explained. Mankind did not issue from one solitary couple, nor was there ever a first man, whether Adam or Yima, but a first mankind. It may or may not be meditated polygenism. Once that both creation, ex nihilo, an absurdity, and a superhuman creator or creators, a fact, are made away with by science, polygenism presents no more difficulties or inconveniences, rather fewer from a scientific point of view, than monogenism does. Nevertheless, it is as scientific as any other claim. For in his introduction to Knots and Gliddon's Types of Mankind, Agassiz declares his belief in an indefinite number of primordial races of men created separately, and remarks that, whilst in every zoological province animals are of different species, man, in spite of the diversity of his races, always forms one and the same human being. Unquote. Occultism defines and limits the number of primordial races to 7 because of the 7 progenitors, or prajapatis, the evolvers of beings. These are neither gods nor supernatural beings, but advanced spirits from another and lower planet, reborn on this one, and giving birth in their turn in the present round to present humanity. This doctrine is again corroborated by one of its echoes, the Gnostic. In their Anthropology and Genesis of Man, they taught that a certain company of 7 angels formed the first men, who were no better than senseless, gigantic, shadowy forms, a mere wriggling worm, within brackets, ! Writes Irenaeus, who takes as usual the metaphor for reality. Subsection D. The septenary in the exoteric works. We may now examine other ancient scriptures and see whether they contain the septenary classification, and if so, to what degree. As much, if not much more, even than in the Jewish Bible, scattered about in the thousands of Sanskrit texts, some still unopened, others yet unknown, as well as in all the Puranas, the numbers 7 and 49, 7 by 7, play a most prominent part. They are found from the 7 creations in chapter 1 down to the 7 rays of the sun at the final pralaya, which expand into 7 suns and absorb the material of the whole universe. Thus the Matsya Purana has, for the sake of promulgating the Vedas, Vishnu in the beginning of a kalpa related to Manu, the story of Narasimha and the events of 7 kalpas. Then again, the same Purana shows that in all the Manvantaras, classes of rishis appear by 7 and 7, and having established a code of law and morality depart to felicity. The rishis representing many other things besides living sages. Note: these are the 7 persons by whom in the several Manvantaras, says Parasara, created beings having been protected. Because the whole world has been pervaded by the energy of the deity, he is entitled Vishnu, from the root vis, to enter, or pervade, for all the gods, the Manus, the 7 rishis, the sons of the Manu, the Indras, all are but the impersonated potencies, Vibhutaya, of Vishnu, from Vishnu Purana. Vishnu is the universe, and the universe itself is divided in the Rig Veda into 7 regions, which ought to be a sufficient authority for the Brahmins at all events. End of note. In hymn 19, verse 53 of Atharva Veda, Dr. Muir's translation, one reads, 1. Time carries us forward, a steed with 7 rays, 1,000 eyes, undecaying, full of fecundity. On him intelligent sages mount, his wheels are all the worlds. 2. Thus time moves on 7 wheels. He has 7 naves. Immortality is his axle. He is at present all these worlds. Time hastens onward the first God. 3. A full jar is contained in time. We behold him existing in many forms. He is all these worlds in the future. They call him time in the highest heaven. Now add to this the following verse from the esoteric volumes. Quote, space and time are one. Space and time are nameless, for they are the incognizable that which can be sensed only through its 7 rays, which are the 7 creations, the 7 worlds, the 7 laws, etc., 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 unquote. Remembering that the Puranas insist on the identity of Vishnu with time and space, and that even the rabbinical symbol for God is makom, space, it becomes clear why, for purposes of a manifesting deity, space, matter, and spirit, the one central point became the triangle and the quaternary, the perfect cube, hence 7. Note: Vishnu is all, the worlds, the stars, the seas, etc., etc. Vishnu is all that is not, but is not Vastu Bhuta, a substance, from Vishnu Purana, Book 2, Chapter 12. That which people call the highest God is not a substance, but the cause of it. Not one that is here, there, or elsewhere, not what we see, but that in which all is, space, unquote. End of note. Even the pravaha, wind, The mystic soul and occult force that gives the impulse to and regulates the course of the stars and planets is septenary. The Kurma and Linga Puranas enumerate 7 principal winds of that name, which winds are the principles of cosmic space. They are intimately connected with the Dhruva, now Alpha, the pole star, which is connected in its turn with the production of various phenomena through cosmic forces. Note: therefore it is said in the Puranas that the view of Dhruva, the pole star, at night, and of the other celestial porpoise, Sisumara, a constellation, expiates whatever sin has been committed during the day. The fact is that the rays of the 4 stars in the circle of perpetual apparition, the Agni, Mahendra, Kashyapa, and Dhruva, placed in the tail of Ursa Minor, Sisumara, focused in a certain way and on a certain object, produce extraordinary results. The astromagians of India will understand what is meant. End of note. Thus, from the 7 creations, 7 rishis, zones, continents, principles, etc., etc., in the Aryan scriptures, the number has passed through Indian, Egyptian, Chaldaic, Greek, Jewish, Roman, and finally Christian mystic thought, until it landed in and remained impressed indelibly on every exoteric theology. The 7 old books stolen out of Noah's Ark by Ham and given to Cush, his son, and the 7 brazen columns of Ham and Cheiron are a reflection and a remembrance of the 7 primordial mysteries instituted according to the 7 secret emanations, the 7 sounds and 7 rays, the spiritual and sidereal models of the 7,000 times 7 copies of them in later aeons. The mysterious number is once more prominent in the no less mysterious Maruts. The Vayu Purana shows, and Harivansa corroborates, that the Martus, the oldest as the most incomprehensible of all the secondary or lower gods in the Rig Veda, are born in every Manvantara round 7 times 7, or 49, that in each Manvantara 4 times 7, or 28, they obtain emancipation, but their places are filled up by persons reborn in that character. What are the Maruts in their esoteric meaning, and who those persons reborn in that character? In the Rig and other Vedas, the Maruts are represented as the storm gods and the friends and allies of Indra. They are the sons of heaven and of earth. This led to an allegory that makes them the children of Shiva, the great patron of the yogis, the Mahayogi, the great ascetic, in whom is centered the highest perfection of austere penance and abstract meditation, by which the most unlimited powers are obtained, marvels and miracles are worked, the highest spiritual knowledge is acquired, and union with the great spirit of the universe is eventually gained. In the Rig Veda the name Shiva is unknown, but the god is called Rudra, which is a word used for Agni, the fire god, the Maruts being called therein his sons. In the Ramayana and the Puranas, their mother, Diti, the sister or complement of and a form of Aditi, anxious to obtain a son who would destroy Indra, is told by Kashyapa the sage that if with thoughts wholly pious and person entirely pure she carries the babe in her womb for 100 years, she will get such a son. But Indra foils her in the design. With his thunderbolt he divides the embryo in her womb into 7 portions, and then divides every such portion into 7 pieces again, which become the swift-moving deities, the Maruts. Note: in the Ramayana it is Balarama, Krishna's elder brother, who does it. End of note. These deities are only another aspect, or a development of the Kumaras, who are the Rudras in their patronymic, like many others. Note: With regard to the origin of Rudra, it is stated in several Puranas that his spiritual progeny, created in him by Brahma, was not confined to either the 7 Kumaras or the 711 Rudras, etc., but comprehends infinite numbers of beings in person and equipments like their Virgin Father. Alarmed at their fierceness, numbers, and immortality, Brahma desires his son Rudra to form creatures of a different and mortal nature. Rudra, refusing to create, desists, etc. Hence Rudra is the first rebel. See Linga, Vayu, Matsya, and other Puranas. End of note. Diti being Aditi, unless the contrary is proven to us, Aditi, we say, or Akasha in her highest form, is the Egyptian sevenfold heaven. Every true occultist will understand what this means. Diti, we repeat, is the 6th principle of metaphysical nature, the Buddhi of Akasha. Diti, the mother of the Maruts, is one of her terrestrial forms, made to represent, at one and the same time, the divine soul in the ascetic and the divine aspirations of mystic humanity toward deliverance from the webs of Maya and final bliss in consequence. Indra, now degraded because of the Kali Yuga, when such aspirations are no more general but have become abnormal through a general spread of ahamkara, the feeling of egotism, self or I-amness, and ignorance, was in the beginning one of the greatest gods of the Hindu pantheon, as the Rig Veda shows. Suradipa, the chief of the gods, has fallen down from Jishnu, the leader of the celestial host, the Hindu Saint Michael, to an opponent of asceticism, the enemy of every holy aspiration. He is shown married to Yandri, Yandrani, the personification of Yandriyaka, the evolution of the element of senses, whom he married because of her voluptuous attractions, after which he began sending celestial female demons to excite the passions of holy men, yogis, and to beguile them from the potent penances which he dreaded. Therefore Indra, now characterized as the god of the firmament, the personified atmosphere, is in reality the cosmic principle Mahat, and the 5th human, Manas, in its dual aspect, as connected with Buddhi, and as allowing himself to be dragged down by his karma principle, the body of passions and desires. This is demonstrated by Brahma telling the conquered god that his frequent defeats were due to karma, and were a punishment for his licentiousness and the seduction of various nymphs. It is in this latter character that he seeks to save himself from destruction, to destroy the coming babe destined to conquer him. The babe, of course, allegorizing the divine and steady will of the yogi, determined to resist all such temptations and thus destroy the passions within his earthly personality. Indra succeeds again because flesh conquers spirit. Diti is shown frustrated in the Dvapara Yuga, during that period when the 4th race was flourishing. He divides the embryo of new divine adeptship, begotten once more by the ascetics of the Aryan 5th race, into 7 portions, a reference not alone to the 7 sub-races of the new root race, in each of which there will be a Manu, but also to the 7 degrees of adeptship, and then each portion into 7 pieces, alluding to the Manu rishis of each root race, and even sub-race. Note: notwithstanding the terrible and evidently purposed confusion of Manus, Rishis, and their progeny in the Puranas, one thing is made clear. There have been, and there will be 7 Rishis in every root race, called also Manvantara in the sacred books, as there are 14 Manus in every round, the presiding gods, the Rishis, and sons of the Manus being identical. See Book 3, Chapter 1 of Vishnu Purana. 6 Manvantaras are given, the 7th being our own in the Vishnu Purana. The Vayu Purana furnishes the nomenclature of the sons of the 14 Manus in every Manvantara, and the sons of the 7 sages or rishis. The latter are the progeny of the progenitors of mankind. All the Puranas speak of the 7 Prajapatis of this period. Round. End of note. It does not seem difficult to perceive what is meant by the Maruts obtaining 4 times 7 emancipations in every Manvantara, and by those persons who, being reborn in that character of the Maruts in the esoteric meaning, fill up their places. The Maruts represent A. The passions that storm and rage within every candidate's breast when preparing for an ascetic life. This mystically. B. The occult potencies concealed in the manifold aspects of Akasha's lower principles, her body or Stula Sharira, representing the terrestrial lower atmosphere of every inhabited globe, this mystically and siderally. C. Actual conscious existences, being of a cosmic and psychic nature. At the same time, Maruts is, in occult parlance, one of the names given to those egos of great adepts who have passed away, and who are known also as Nirmanakayas, of those egos for whom, since they are beyond illusion, there is no Devakan, and who, having either voluntarily renounced it for the good of mankind or not yet reached Nirvana, remain invisible on earth. Therefore are the Maruts shown firstly as the sons of Shiva Rudra, the patron yogi, whose 3rd eye mystically must be acquired by the ascetic before he becomes an adept. Then in their cosmic character as the subordinates of Indra and his opponents, variously. Note on the Maruts. Chaksuba was the Manu of the 6th period, 3rd round and 3rd race, in which Indra was Manojava, Mantradruma in the Bhagavata Purana. As there is a perfect analogy between the great round, Mahakalpa, each of the 7 rounds, and each of the 7 great races in every one of the rounds, therefore Indra of the 6th period, or 3rd round, corresponds to the close of the 3rd race at the time of the fall, or separation of sexes. Rudra, as the father of the Maruts, has many points to contact with Indra, the Marutvan, or Lord of the Maruts. To receive a name, Rudra is said to have wept for it. Brahma called him Rudra, but he wept 7 times more, and so obtained 7 other names, of which he uses 1 during each period. End of note. The 4 times 7 emancipations have a reference to the 4 rounds and the 4 races that preceded ours, in each of which Marut Jivas, monads, have been reborn and have obtained final liberation, if they have only availed themselves of it. Instead of which, preferring the good of mankind, which would struggle still more hopelessly in the meshes of ignorance and misery, were it not for this extraneous help, they are reborn over and over again in that character, and thus fill up their own places. Who they are on earth, every student of occult science knows, and he also knows that the Maruts are Rudras, among whom also the family of Tvashtri, a synonym of Vishvakarman, the great patron of the initiates, is included. This gives us an ample knowledge of their true nature. The same for the septenary division of cosmos and human principles. The Puranas, along with other sacred texts, teem with allusions to this. First of all, the mundane egg which contained Brahma, or the universe, was externally invested with 7 natural elements, at first loosely enumerated as water, air, fire, ether, and 3 secret elements, Book 1. Then the world is said to be encompassed on every side by 7 elements, also within the egg, as explained. The universe is encompassed on every side above and below by the Andakataha, the shell of the egg of Brahma. Around the shell flows water, which is surrounded with fire, fire by air, air by ether, ether by the origin of the elements, ahamkara, the latter by universal mind, intellect in the texts. See Book 2, Chapter 7 of Vishnu Purana. It relates to spheres of being as much as to principles. Prithvi is not our earth, but the world, the solar system, and means the broad, the wide. In the Vedas, the greatest of all authorities, though needing the key to read it correctly, 3 terrestrial and 3 celestial earths are mentioned as having been called into existence simultaneously with Bhumi, our earth. We have often been told that 6, not 7, appears to be the number of spheres, principles, etc. We answer that there are in fact only 6 principles in man, since his body is no principle, but the covering, the shell thereof. So with the planetary chain. Speaking of which, esoterically, the earth, as well as the 7th, or rather 4th plane, one that stands as the 7th if we count from the first triple kingdom of the elementals that begin the formation, may be left out of consideration, being to us the only distinct body of the 7. The language of occultism is varied, but supposing that 3 earths only instead of 7 are meant in the Vedas, what are those 3, since we still know of but 1? Evidently there must be an occult meaning in the statement under consideration. Let us see. The earth that floats on the universal ocean of space, which Brahma divides in the Puranas into 7 zones, is Prithvi, the world divided into 7 principles. A cosmic division looking metaphysical enough, but in reality physical in its occult effects. Many kalpas later, our earth is mentioned, and, in its turn, is divided into 7 zones. See the Puranas, on that same law of analogy that guided ancient philosophers. After which one finds on it 7 continents, 7 isles, 7 oceans, 7 seas and rivers, 7 mountains, and 7 climates, etc., etc., etc. Note: in the Vishnu Purana, Book 2, Chapter 4, it is stated that the earth, with its continents, mountains, oceans, and exterior shell, is 50 crores, 500 millions, of yojanas in extent, to which the commentator remarks that this comprises the planetary spheres. For the diameter of the 7 zones and oceans, each ocean being of the same diameter as the content it encloses, and each successive continent being twice the diameter of that which precedes it, amounts to but 2 crores or 54 lakhs, etc. Whenever any contradictions in different Puranas occur, they have to be ascribed to differences of kalpas and the like. The like ought to read occult meaning, which explanation is withheld by the commentator who wrote for exoteric, sectarian purposes, and was misunderstood by the translator for various other reasons, the least of which is ignorance of the esoteric philosophy. End of note. Furthermore, it is not only in the Hindu scriptures and philosophy that one finds references to the 7 earths, but in the Persian, Phoenician, Chaldean, and Egyptian cosmogonies, and even in rabbinical literature. The phoenix, called by the Hebrews Onik, from Phenok, Enoch, symbol of a secret cycle and initiation, and by the Turks Kerkis, lives 1,000 years, after which, kindling a flame, it is self-consumed. And then, reborn from itself, it lives another 1,000 years, up to 7 times 7. It lives another 1,000 years, up to 7 times 7, when comes the day of judgment. The phoenix, connected with the solar cycle of 600 years, with ciphers taken out, or with more added according to which cycle is meant, The Western cycle of the Greeks and other nations is a generic symbol for several kinds of cycles. Fuller details will be given in the section on kalpas and cycles. See Book of Ali, Russian translation. The 7 times 7, 49, are transparent allegory and an allusion to the 49 manus, the 7 rounds and the 7 times 7 human cycles in each round on each globe. The Kerkes and the Onyx stand for a race cycle, and the mystical tree Ababel, the father tree in the Quran, shoots out new branches and vegetation at every resurrection of the Kerkes or Phoenix, the day of judgment, meaning a minor pralaya. See Esoteric Buddhism. The author of the Book of God and the Apocalypse believes that the phoenix is very plainly the same as the simurg, the Persian rook, and the account which is given us of this last bird yet more decisively establishes the opinion that the death and revival of the phoenix exhibit the successive destruction and reproduction of the world, which may be believed to be effected by the agency of a fiery deluge, and a watery one in turn. When the Simurg was asked her age, she informed Kahraman that this world is very ancient, for it has been already 7 times replenished with beings different from men, and 7 times depopulated. Note: the tense is the past, because the book is allegorical and has to veil the truths contained. End of note. That the age of the human race in which we now are is to endure 7,000 numbers, and that she herself has seen 12 of these revolutions, and knew not how many more she had to see. Unquote from Oriental Collections, Volume 2, page 119. The above, however, is no new statement. From Bailly in the last century down to Dr. Kinnelly in this one, these facts have been noticed by several writers, but now a connection can be established between the Persian oracle and the Nazarene prophet. Says the author of the Book of God, quote, the Simurg is in reality the same as the winged Sink of the Hindus and the Sphinx of the Egyptians. It is said that the former will appear at the end of the world as a monstrous lion bird. From these the rabbins have borrowed their mythos of an enormous bird, sometimes standing on the earth, sometimes walking in the ocean, while its head props the sky. And with the symbol they have also adopted the doctrine to which it relates. They teach that there are to be 7 successive renewals of the globe, that each reproduced system will last 7,000 years, within brackets question mark, and that the total duration of the universe will be 49,000 years. This opinion, which involves the doctrine of the pre-existence of each renewed creature, they may either have learned during the Babylonian captivity, or it may have been part of the primeval religion which their priests had preserved from remote times. Taken from page 176. It shows rather that the initiated Jews borrowed, and their non-initiated successors, the Talmudists, lost the sense and applied the 7 rounds and the 49 races, etc., to the wrong end. Not only their priests, but those of every other country. The Gnostics, whose various teachings are the many echoes of the one primitive and universal doctrine, put the same numbers under another form, in the mouth of Jesus in the very occult Pistis Sophia. We say more, even the Christian editor or author of Revelation has preserved this tradition and speaks of the 7 races, 4 of which, with part of the 5th, are gone, and 2 have to come. It is stated as plainly as could be stated in chapter 17, verses 9 and 10. Thus saith the angel, And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains, on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. Who, acquainted in the least with the symbolical language of old, will fail to discern in the 5 kings that have fallen the 4 root races that were, and part of the 5th, the one that is, and in the other that is not yet come, the 6th and 7th coming root races, as also the sub-races of this our present race. Another still more forcible allusion to the 7 rounds and the 49 root races in Leviticus will be found elsewhere in the Addenda, Part 3. Subsection E is up next. 7 in Astronomy, Science and Magic.